Imagine a world where a single beat on a drum could awaken forces older than time itself. A lone traveler, burdened by secrets, wanders into a cursed desert. With each strike of his drum, shadows stir, watching, waiting, whispering promises no man should ever hear. But was he summoning guardians of light, or messengers of doom? Welcome to Tales by Lymarh. Please like, share and subscribe. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of crimson and gold. A lone traveler trudged along the cracked earth, his clothes torn from long journeys, his lips dry from thirst. Across his back hung a drum, not ordinary, but carved from obsidian and etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the dying light. The villagers of Kadora had warned him, "Do not strike that drum in the desert after sundown. For the shadows hear, and they answer." But desperation pushes men beyond reason. He sought not survival but something greater, vengeance. As he neared the colossal ancient gate rising in the distance, guarded by faceless figures that shimmered like mirages, the traveler's grip on the drum tightened. Dust swirled at his feet, as though the desert itself held its breath. Night fell quickly, swallowing the desert in silence. The faceless guards by the gate stood still, like statues carved from smoke. The traveler sat before them, unrolling a mat of black leather, and placed his drum at the center. He raised the mallet. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. With one thunderous strike, the air split apart. Boom! The sound carried unnaturally, echoing far beyond the horizon. The sands shifted. The faceless guards turned their heads in unison. Then came the whisper, dozens of voices layered as one, "Who summons us?" The traveler bowed his head. "I am Ekene, son of the fallen. I call you to avenge what was stolen." The shadows stirred. Figures began peeling away from the darkness, tall and skeletal, their eyes glowing like dying embers. Each step they took left black footprints that did not. The shadows encircled him, whispering secrets that cut through his mind like blades. One, taller than the rest, stepped forward, its body shifting between human form and formless mist. "We do not serve freely," it hissed. "Blood calls us. Blood binds us." Ekene knew this moment would come. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a locket containing the portrait of his sister, the only family he had left. His voice broke. "Take what you will, but grant me the strength to destroy the king who slaughtered my people." The Shadow Lord's laughter was like rusted metal grinding together. "So noble. So foolish. You summon us for justice, yet your justice drips with vengeance. Strike the drum again, and the pact shall be sealed." Ekene hesitated. He could feel his sister's memory clinging to him, like a final plea. But rage burned hotter. He lifted the mallet. Boom! The shadows roared, their forms thickening, their power unfurling like a storm across the desert. The ancient gate groaned, its golden symbols flickering as though fighting to resist. The faceless guard stepped aside, bowing before the gathering shadows. Beyond the gate stretched a city in ruins, its walls blackened, its air heavy with despair. The shadows surged toward it, their whispers growing louder, "A kingdom to burn, a king to devour." Ekene followed, his heart pounding. For the first time, he felt both powerful and powerless. He had called forth forces no mortal could truly command. With every step, he wondered, was he leading the shadows, or were they leading him? The moon rose high, casting pale silver light across the destruction. Yet in that glow, Ekene saw the truth, his own shadow no longer moved as he did. It writhed and twisted on its own, smiling when he did not. The shadows had not just answered his call. They had claimed him. The gate's hinges groaned like an old beast waking. Ekene stepped through into a city that once knew music. Stone courtyards lay shattered, marketplace stalls splintered, signboards hanging by single nails, the ghosts of commerce swaying. In the alleyways, the desert wind sifted ash into braided dunes against the walls. Overhead, the moon hung polished and pitiless, painting every ruin in bone-white light. The shadows fanned out ahead of him. They didn't walk, they slid, the way thought glides before you speak it out loud. They pooled under doorways, slipped across balconies, tasted surfaces with their thin, questing fingers. When Ekene paused, they paused too. When he breathed shallow, their heads tilted as if to listen to the breath itself. He passed a toppled statue of a musician, flute to lips, its face split neatly in half. Someone had tried to protect it with woven mats, someone else had set it on fire anyway. Ekene's jaw tightened. The king had ordered this, the villagers of Katora had said. He burned art first, then people. He feared the language of rhythm because rhythm remembers what kings try to forget. A shape darted in the corner of his eye. Not shadow. Small. Human. Ekene turned, drum strap biting into his shoulder. A child, 10 at most, peered from behind a broken water jar, eyes bright as struck metal. In her fist, she clutched a tiny bell carved from pale stone. "Don't let them hear that," he whispered, nodding at the bell. "They already hear everything," she answered. "But this sound is not for them." She lifted the bell and, without ringing it, pressed its rim to her lips like a kiss, then hit it again. Between them, the street held its breath. Then the child withdrew, vanishing into a slit of darkness between two cracked walls. Ekene took 3 steps toward the gap and felt a firm resistance across his chest. He looked down. His own shadow had stretched tight, a black band restraining him like a sash. He swallowed hard. The pact had hands now. A distant clamor rose, brittle and bright. Soldiers' laughter. At once the shadows surged. Delighted. They curled back toward the heart of the city, drawing Ekene with them like leaves pulled by a tide. Somewhere ahead, a drum began to beat, a crude, arrogant rhythm. Not his. A challenge. The city answered with echoes. The palace didn't loom, it brooded. Its edges were too clean against the sky, like a wound stitched badly. Inside, corridors yawned with rugs chewed to threads. Torches burned with dull, oil-choked flames. Guards' armor clicked like beetles underfoot, their eyes skittered away from Ekene's drum, unable to look for long at the etchings that glowed as though remembering fire. The throne room opened like a mouth. A dais rose in tiers of black stone. Upon it sat a king carved by sleeplessness, cheekbones like blades, lips cracked, a crown that looked too heavy for the skull beneath it. He held a scepter, his hand trembled. "Drummer," the king said, voice low, carrying. "I know the color of your grief, though I did not pour it." He gestured weakly at the guards, who slipped away like apologies. Ekene's shadows flowed to the room's corners, stretching vines of darkness over pillars and wall carvings, caressing the stones with curiosity and hunger. The king's torchlight stuttered. "You burned our village," Ekene said, each word precise, as if laying stones for a bridge he must cross only once. "Katora. You burned the songs first. You burned the elders second. My sister hid in the calabash store. The smoke found her." The king's eyes flickered at the word sister, as if it scratched a veil he had tried to hang inside his head. "I burned what was already on fire," the king said. "You think tyranny is always the tyrant's first choice? Sometimes it's his last defense. You are not the first who came here with a drum of that kind." Ekene's fingers tightened around the mallet. "What kind?" The king inclined his head toward the drum. "Obsidian heartwood. Blood-bound. Those markings, see how they avoid the center? That is not ornament. It's a map of a wound." The Shadow Lord, a taller smear among smears, leaned closer to Ekene's ear. "A king's mouth is a theater. He performs mercy when he is cornered. Strike, and the play ends. Someone else summoned them before, the king said, voice cracking. Long ago. Not for justice. For greed. He swept a shaky hand at the carvings along the wall. Scenes of past rulers, festivals, and a circle of drummers surrounding a gate like the one Ekene had crossed. The drum patterns were chiseled in bands, sharp, beautiful, mathematical. Ekene felt them in his bones. The drum in his hands vibrated in silent recognition. Who? Ekene asked. The king's mouth folded. Your people's rivals. Or perhaps your people, under different names. Every version of history accuses the other. Shadows fatten on that. The Shadow Lord's fingers walked up Ekene's spine. He wishes to loosen the knot in your hands. Let him tug. Then pull. Return what you stole, Ekene said, voice iron. A king cannot keep music in chains. I came for vengeance, I will take justice. The king's laugh was a small, dry thing. And the difference? Behind Ekene, a torch guttered. Along the base of the dais, he noticed a line of small bells, pale stone, like the child's. Their clappers had been removed. A ward. Or a warning. Give me the third beat, the Shadow Lord whispered, almost tender. Seal us. We will make his bones sing for you. Ekene raised the mallet. The king did not beg. He did something worse. He sang. Not a song of persuasion. A lullaby. Raw, untrained, full of gravel and grief. It was not beautiful. It was true. The drum in Ekene's hands shivered. That lullaby, ordinary, cracked, found a door in Ekene's memory and opened it. A mat on a cool floor. A girl with ash on her forehead and laughter in her lashes. Sister. She hummed when she worked, she hummed when she mended. She hummed when the soldiers came, until smoke filled the song like water fills lungs. Ekene lowered the mallet an inch. The shadow circle tightened. The tallest shadow cocked its head. Softness is a costume sorrow wears when it hunts. Its voice was coals whispering to one another. Finish it, the shadow urged. The pact unclosed is a wound. Let it scar. Ekene stared at the etchings on the drumhead, spirals looping into angles, a language of impact. He saw what the king meant. The pattern avoided the center. It channeled force away from one point, as if that point were a sink for something delicate. A name. A soul. A debt. What binds you? Ekene asked, not to the king. The Shadow Lord smiled without lips. Names. Promises. The sweet meet between intention and act. What frees you? The same. Ekene understood something sharp enough to bleed on. The third beat would not merely seal the pact, it would place his name in the drum center. Names anchor. Names drown. He raised the mallet anyway, elbow loose, wrist supple, the way his mother had taught him when banging cassava mortars into music. He did not strike. He tapped, once, at the edge. A whisper beat, lighter than a blink. Then another, just beside it. Then a third, grazing the rim like a moth's wing. The rhythm tiptoed rather than thundered. It asked instead of commanded. The shadows recoiled a fraction, surprised. This was not the speech they were used to. Ekene let the pattern creep, a ring of tiny breaths around the drumhead's forbidden heart. The room's torches leaned inward, curious. The king's song faltered, then steadied. Ekene echoed it, gently, respectfully, as if placing cool cloths on a fevered brow. The drum, meant to be a blade, became a hand. A filament of shadow snapped like a pulled hair. Another loosened. Around the dais, the pale bells vibrated though they had no clappers, whispering chalky whispers. The Shadow Lord hissed, a sound like fresh water hitting a hot pan. Caution is the cowardice of the righteous, it spat. Strike. Ekene looked at the king. You burned the songs. The king blinked. I burned what the songs were calling. I did not know how else to stop them. Who taught you the lullaby? The king looked past him, beyond their present, into a room long lost. My mother. On nights when the wind carried too many voices. Ekene felt his sister's phantom weight on his shoulder, the way she used to lean on him when the night was big and loud and the roof sang. He thought, vengeance will eat her memory until it tastes like iron. Mercy will hurt. But I will still taste her laughter inside it. He lowered the mallet. Not yet, he said to the shadows. The palace trembled as if a giant turned in sleep under its foundations. Outside, somewhere far and very near, the city began to whisper, the way fields do when wind runs fingers through them. Ekene traced the lullaby's rhythm again, but he changed it, 3 slow breaths, then a quick pair, hum, hum, hush, hum hum, the way his sister used to soothe a kettle boiling over. The shadows raked their fingers along the pillars. Lines of frost laced the stone, cold so intense it burned. The tallest shadow leaned close, voice all sugar now. Let him sing. Then let him watch while you unmake what believes it forgave him. Ekene tuned the drum on instinct, thumb to the edge, wrist pressure light, turning the pitch until it vibrated with the exact sadness in the king's voice. He let that note bloom into the room. It crawled across the dais, gentle as dawn sneaking under a door. Something shifted behind the throne, a ripple in the tapestries. The faceless guards from the gate stepped out of the woven patterns, their surfaces smooth as polished basalt, their edges lit with that faint, golden thread Ekene had noticed at the desert gate. They bowed, not to the king, not to the shadows. To the rhythm. The tallest guard lifted a hand. Long, elegant fingers traced arcs in the air, leaving gold filaments that hummed. Not faces, Ekene realized. Masks. And beneath them, no features at all. They were shape without appetite. Frame without story. A pure hinge for a door between worlds. The guards began to sign. Not with hands alone, with posture, with angle, with stillness. Ekene's skin prickled. He recognized the grammar without knowing it, keep weaving. So he did. He braided the lullaby into a call and response with silence. He played the space between beats as fiercely as he had once hammered the center. He felt the drum breathe with him, skin warming under his palms. He played the almost of a strike, he played restraint. The bells answered from the dais in dry, white murmurs, we hear. We hear. We hear. The shadows bucked. The tallest snarled, its edges fraying. Your grief is a gate. Let us through it. Ekene looked at the king, at the tremble that wouldn't leave the scepter hand. He looked at the bells without clappers. He looked inward, where the smoke of cat aura curled around his ribs. Then he did the most dangerous thing a drummer can do. He stopped. The silence that followed was not absence. It was a word you can only hear when you swallow the rest of the sentence. In that silence, Ekene spoke, quiet, but carrying. I release the shape of vengeance. I will not feed it. Let what I loved remain itself. Names matter. Promises matter. The sweet meat between intention and act, yes, that matters most. The pact shuddered. A seam appeared in the tallest shadow's chest, a thin bright line like dawn under a door. The masks of the guards turned toward it. The golden thread along their edges brightened. One guard approached and touched the seam with a fingertip of light. The shadow screamed without sound. It did not die. It thinned. Its hunger dulled as if its teeth had been soaked in milk. Ekene felt the drum grow heavier, not as a threat, as a responsibility. You can end a pact quickly with blood. You can end it slowly with love. Both cost. The palace took on the hush of a storm counting backwards from lightning. Ekene replaced the mallet on its strap and played with open hands now, heel and finger, ghosting the skin, making it purr. He played the night his sister braided his hair and complained he never sat still. He played the day their mother spilled gari and laughed while she swept it up. He played the shame that he hadn't been there when the soldiers came. He played it and didn't hide. The shadows shook as if under rain. Their long limbs softened. The tallest staggered toward the throne, reached a hand for the king's throat and stopped an inch away, fingers trembling. It couldn't finish the sentence it had come here to write. The king stared at Ekene, something like horror opening in his face. The horror of a man shown a door he told himself didn't exist. He sank to his knees and pressed his forehead to the floor. The scepter rolled, clacked against the stone, and fell off the dais. The sound was small and exact. "Make it easy," the king whispered. "I have done worse than you know, trying to stop what I could not see." Ekene's chest burned. "I will not make it easy. I will make it true." He looked at his own shadow. It no longer bound his chest, but it didn't lie flat either. It lifted its head, curious, almost, listening. He crouched, touched it. His fingers made a ripple, like wind across a grass lake. "You can stay," he told it. "But you will not lead." The Shadow Lord's voice lost its teeth and gained its age. "You choose a long road." "Yes," Ekene said. The guards, those mask-faced hinges, stepped closer. The gold thread around them brightened into quiet flame. One knelt before the king and placed a palm against his sternum. "Not harm. Not healing. Reckoning." The king arched. Gasped, as if something inside him that had been pacing for years finally lay down and went still. When he opened his eyes, the room had shifted focus. He looked smaller. Mortal-sized. "I cannot give you back your sister," he said. "But I can open the houses I sealed, free the prisoners, end the decrees that made singing a crime. Not to purchase your mercy, because the sound of what I've done cannot be cleaned, only acknowledged." Ekene nodded, once. "You will do those things before dawn." The king bowed his head. "Before moonset." He stood, barely, and turned to go. He took 2 steps, stumbled. His shadow did something strange. It separated cleanly from his heels and looked at him. For an instant, only that, the king's shadow laughed without him. Not cruelly. With relief. It walked away and dissolved into the floor like spilled ink. The king exhaled, a long, inward drifting sound. He fell. No violence touched him. The body simply stopped believing in its impersonation of a throne. He died the way a lie does, quietly, once it runs out of room. Ekene flinched, not at death, but at the weightless after. The tallest shadow looked at the guards, then at the drum. "You unbound us from hunger. That does not make us harmless." "I know," Ekene said. "Then why?" "Because I would rather live with a dangerous truth than a safe lie." He touched the drum's center, gently. The etchings around it warmed, then cooled. "And because she would have wanted me to leave a road for someone else." The child appeared again, stone bell cradled in 2 hands like an egg. She came straight to the dais, calm as moonlight, and looked up at Ekene. "The bells don't ring," she said. "They listen. If you hold them while you forgive something, they remember it for the city." Ekene nodded. "Help me remember this, then." They stood together in the hush, bell between them, while the shadows drifted like drowsy fish. Dawn began as rumor along the palace windows. The guards. The hinges, the keepers of doors, moved to the room's edges and pressed their palms to the stone. Gold threads bled from their fingers, stitching the walls with a pattern that echoed the drum's gentler rhythm. Not a prison. A frame. The tallest shadow addressed Ekene, no longer lordly, just old. "We answer calls." "You changed the call. Then change your answers," he said. "To what?" "To warnings. To witness. Not to knives." The shadow considered this. One could see it thinking now, where before one only heard it wanting. "We are not good." "Neither am I," Ekene said softly. "But today, I was better." A stillness rippled through what remained of the court. The child with the bell began to hum, the same cracked lullaby, bright now, shy of joy. Outside, soldiers' helmets clinked, locks clicked open, voices rose, first suspicious, then stunned, then ringing. Ekene went to the throne and set the drum upon it, not as a trophy, as a task. He unwound the strap and coiled it at the base. He touched the drumhead center. For a heartbeat, warmth touched his palm, like a forehead leaning into a hand. He whispered his sister's name into the skin, not to bind the pact, but to replace its heart with hers. "Not for vengeance," he said. "For remembering." The guards inclined their masked heads. The shadows drew back, thinner now, edges frayed by dawn. The tallest lifted a hand in something like blessing, or truce. "Go," Ekene told them. "When men call in fury, wait. When they call in grief, listen. When they call in love, come, if you must, but leave them more of themselves than you take." "We can try," the old shadow said. "Trying is an art we were not made for. Perhaps we can learn it." They withdrew, slipping under doors, between stones, into the seams the guards had stitched with golden thread. The palace exhaled. Ekene stepped into the courtyard. The city's air tasted different, smoke thinned, light oiled with morning. Freed prisoners stumbled into the squares, blinking like animals released from traps. Some sang without meaning to. Some wept as if surprised their tears still worked. Ekene saw the child's bell catch sunlight and flash a single, silent note. He walked back through the market of broken signboards and unspilled promises. At the edge of the city, the great gate waited, the same, yet not. The faceless guards stood with their golden edges dimmed to calm. As Ekene approached, they opened a path. He hesitated. He had come here to end something with heat. He was leaving having begun something with work. In the desert, the sand took his footprints and considered them. A wind rose, the kind that tastes like a decision even before you make it. Ekene lifted his face to it and felt, not absolution, not approval, companionship. He was not alone in choosing the long road. Behind him, a chorus of small bells, dozens, hundreds, vibrated once, twice, as if the city were nodding to itself. "Walk," his sister would have said. "You can rest when you've taught someone else the lullaby." Ekene smiled, barely. He started down the cracked road, the horizon the color of new steel, the drumlight gone from his back and something heavier but kinder taking its place. He did not look to see if his shadow followed. He could feel it, a step behind, matchstick thin in the waking light, learning how not to lead. The desert dawn stretched wide and unbroken, as though the earth itself wanted to breathe again. Ekene walked alone down the cracked road, yet he carried more than the drum he had once wielded, he carried the weight of choice. He had stood before vengeance and chosen memory. He had stood before shadows and chosen restraint. Behind him, the city of ashes stirred like a sleeper who had nearly drowned in a dream but woke with air still in the lungs. Freed prisoners touched their faces as though surprised to still have them. Children's laughter, thin, uncertain, rose for the first time in years. The bells hummed in windows, gentle as wind through a forest, remembering forgiveness like a rhythm no one could silence. The shadows did not vanish. They lingered in corners, softer, thinner, no longer predators but witnesses. They had been fed by centuries of anger, but Ekene had forced them to taste something they had never known, mercy woven into grief. That taste changed them, if only slightly. And sometimes, a slight change is all eternity needs to bend in a new direction. As he walked, Ekene glanced at his shadow. For the first time, it didn't writhe or pull. It simply walked with him, small, steady, obedient to the sun. And in its stillness, he heard an echo, his sister's voice, singing the lullaby not as a wound, but as a gift. She was gone, yes, but her memory had not been chained to hatred. Her laughter, her warmth, her song would not be swallowed by vengeance. It would live as rhythm. At the edge of the desert road, Ekene stopped, lifted his gaze to the horizon, and whispered a vow not just to himself, but to every traveler who might come after. If you ever hold a drum, strike it not only with your anger, but with your heart. For the beat you choose shapes not only the shadows you summon, but the light that follows you. And so the tale of the drummer who summoned shadows was no longer only about destruction. It became about the courage to bend darkness toward remembrance, and to turn grief into a rhythm that healed instead of consumed. Moral of the story. Vengeance promises fire, but leaves only ashes. Mercy is harder, but it leaves behind a road others can walk. Every gift of power carries a price, but the greatest power lies in restraint, in choosing not what you can do, but what you should. Our shadows follow us, but they need not lead us. We are remembered not by the fury of our drumbeats, but by the compassion we dared to weave into them. And so, dear listeners, the story of The Drummer Who Summoned Shadows comes to an end, but the echoes of its rhythm still remain. What shadows would answer if you struck the drum? Would they come hungry, or would they come humbled? That choice lies not in the drum, but in your heart. Thought balloon. Fire. If this tale stirred you, don't let it vanish like dust in the desert wind. Hit that like button, share this story with a friend who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to Tales by Lymarh for more African folktales filled with mystery, lessons, and unforgettable journeys. Sparkles. Until next time, remember, every story is a shadow, but how it walks beside you depends on the light you choose to carry. Crescent Moon.